Alara had always known this day would come, the day her choice would no longer matter. For months, she had felt the walls of expectation closing around her, each conversation with her parents tightening like a rope being pulled steadily by unseen hands. "It is a good match," they said. "It will secure our future. He will take care of you." But no one ever once asked if she wanted him. No one seemed to notice that her silence wasn't agreement, it was suffocation. The morning of her arranged wedding, long before the sun rose, Alara lay awake on her thin straw mattress, fingers digging into the blanket, as if hanging on would keep the day from coming. She could already hear the distant bustle outside, the early preparations, the hushed voices, the soft crackle of someone lighting the cookfires. Her wedding dress hung in the corner like a ghost waiting to swallow her whole. She had imagined herself walking down the path toward a man she barely knew, imagining the future that would follow. A life spent serving someone who saw her less as a partner and more as a possession. The thought curled cold fingers around her ribs. She couldn't do it. Not anymore. Not ever. Her breath trembled as she sat up and reached for the small satchel she'd hidden beneath the bed. Inside were only the bare essentials: a bit of dried fruit, a knife, a water skin, and a thin blanket. That was all she dared to steal without raising suspicion. It wasn't enough for a long journey, but it was enough to run. Outside, the world was still deep blue, the sky waiting for dawn. She crept through the narrow hallway, avoiding the one floorboard she knew would groan under her weight. Her father's heavy footsteps were absent. He was likely already preparing for the day he'd give her away, pride swelling in his chest. When she reached the back door, her heart hammered against her ribs so hard she was sure the whole settlement could hear it. For a moment she hesitated, hand trembling on the wooden latch. If they caught her, they would drag her back. They would make her marry. The punishment would be severe and permanent, but staying would be worse. With one sharp breath, she slipped into the night. The cold air slapped her cheeks, waking her fully. She ran, skirts gathered in her fists, feet silent on the damp earth. She did not look back. Her breath came out in puffs as she crossed the fields and raced toward the trees, the edge of the Cherokee hunting grounds, a place her people warned her never to enter. That was exactly why she chose it. The forest swallowed her quickly, shadows embracing her like an old friend. The branches overhead blocked the moonlight, and the silence pressed against her ears. Every rustle, every crack of a twig, made her flinch. But fear was nothing compared to the terror she'd left behind. Hours passed. Her legs burned. Blisters formed. She stumbled once, then twice, catching herself before falling. The satchel felt heavier with each mile, but she couldn't stop. Not until the settlement was far behind her. Near midday, exhaustion finally dragged her down. She collapsed near a fallen log, chest heaving, limbs shaking. Sweat dampened her hairline as she pressed her back against the rough bark. She had escaped, but escape was only the beginning. As she closed her eyes, believing herself alone in the vast wilderness, she didn't hear the soft footsteps approaching. She didn't see the careful eyes watching her from between the pines. She didn't yet know that her desperate flight had led her straight into the path of a man who would change everything. Tawi had been tracking the deer since dawn, following its delicate hoofprints across the soft earth. The forest was quiet, the kind of quiet he understood, alive, listening, breathing with him. He moved like an extension of the land, steady, patient, attentive to every shift in wind and every broken blade of grass. But when he reached a stretch of ground where the deer's trail should have continued, something unexpected pulled him to a halt. Footprints. Not the careful steps of a hunter, not the heavy tread of a man. These were small, unsteady, and rushed. A woman. Tawi crouched low, touching one print with the tip of his finger. The earth still held warmth. She hadn't passed long ago. He let his eyes trace the direction of her path, zigzagging, stumbling, panicked. Whoever she wasn't moving with purpose. She was moving with fear. His jaw tightened. The forest carried many dangers for someone so unprepared. Predators, cliffs, sudden storms. And trespassers often meant trouble. Sick settlers bringing conflict, or desperate ones bringing pity he could not afford to give. But something in these tracks tugged at him. They spoke of exhaustion, of someone running until her body failed her. And though it wasn't his responsibility, Tawi was not the kind of man who could turn away from suffering, especially not when it walked straight into his lands. He followed Dot. It didn't take long before he found her. She was slumped beside a fallen log, chest rising and falling with painful heaviness. Sweat dampened her temples, and her hair clung to her cheeks in wild strands. Her dress plain, simple, the kind worn by settlers, was torn at the hem where the forest had bitten into it. Her satchel lay in the dirt beside her, half open, as if she dropped it moments before collapsing. Tawi stepped silently into the clearing, observing her. Her hands trembled even in rest. Dirt smudged her arms. She looked fragile, but not in the way that came from weakness. She looked worn down, as if she had been strong for too long and her strength had finally broken. He made no sound, yet her eyes fluttered open, startled, frightened. She jerked upright, scrambling back until her shoulders hit the log. "Please," her voice cracked. I don't want trouble." Her English was fluent. Her fear, even more so. Tawi stayed still, both hands open at his sides to show he meant no harm. "You are far from your settlement," he said calmly. "These woods are not safe for you." She swallowed, chest still trembling. "I didn't have a choice." He studied her a moment longer. The desperation in her voice matched the story the earth had told him. Someone had driven her into this forest. Someone dangerous enough to make her risk everything. He reached slowly into the pack slung across his shoulder. Her eyes widened, and she flinched as though expecting violence. Instead, Tawi withdrew a small water skin and offered it to her. She stared at it as though it were a trick. "It is water," he said simply. "Drink." Her throat bobbed as she took it with shaking hands. She drank too quickly at first, then slowed, as though remembering caution. When she handed it back, she whispered, "Thank you." "What are you running from?" he asked. Her gaze darted away. "People who think they own me." Tawi felt something shift inside him, an understanding deeper than words. He had seen settlers use their daughters like bargaining pieces. He had seen women flee brutality only to be dragged back in chains of expectations. He exhaled slowly. "You cannot stay here alone," he told her. "If you try, they will find you." Her lips parted, trembling. "Then what should I do?" Tawi held her gaze, steady as the mountain stone he had grown up on. "Come with me," he said, "and rest where no one can touch you." For a long moment, Alara could only stare at him, unsure if she'd heard correctly. Come with me. No threat, no demand. Just a calm offer spoken by a man who seemed carved from steadiness itself. Something inside her wavered, fear fighting with an unfamiliar urge to trust him. But trust was something she had learned to ration. Still, her legs trembled too badly to stand on their own, and every instinct warned her that staying here meant being found. When Tawi extended a hand not to pull her, but to help her rise, she hesitated only a heartbeat before taking it. His hand was warm, steady, grounding. He helped her stand, releasing her as soon as she found her balance. She expected him to turn immediately, to stride ahead as if she weren't slowing him down. But he didn't. He watched her for a moment, as though assessing how far she could manage, then nodded toward the deeper forest. "We must move," he said. They slipped into the woods, Tawi leading with silent precision. Alara moved as quietly as she could, but compared to him, she felt like a storm crashing through the branches. He paused often, listening not to her, she realized, but to the forest itself. Every so often, he'd raise a hand, motioning for her to stop. She obeyed, breath held, heart pounding. At first, she didn't hear anything. Then she did. Voices. Far in the distance, but not far enough. Alara stiffened. The sound scraped against her nerves like claws. She recognized the harsh tones even before she understood the words. Men shouting her name. Men she had lived among for years, but never truly known. Men who didn't believe she had the right to run. "They followed me," she whispered, horror draining the blood from her face. Tawi's expression didn't change, but the air around him hardened. "How many?" "5. Maybe more." Her voice shook. "My father, and the man I was supposed to marry." Tawi's jaw flexed. "They are on horseback?" She nodded. He glanced at the canopy overhead, calculating something she couldn't decipher. "Then they will move fast." Her stomach dropped. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Listen to me. They know these woods less than you do. They will shout, and break branches, and leave tracks even a child could follow. His gaze held hers, steady enough to anchor her. But they do not know my land. Before she could reply, a distant twig snapped sharp, deliberate. Too close. Tawi's expression sharpened. Move. They plunged deeper into the forest, Tawi adjusting his pace to hers without comment. Every time she stumbled, he was there, not grabbing, not pushing, but offering a quiet presence that kept her from falling. Behind them, the voices grew loud. Ilara, girl, you hear me? Come out now and we'll make this easy. She flinched at every word. Shame, anger, and terror twisted inside her. She'd known they would come after her, but she hadn't expected them to sound so confident, as though she belonged to them by right. Tawi stopped abruptly, raising a hand. Ilara froze. The wind shifted. His eyes narrowed. They are closer than I hoped. Her breath hitched. What do we do? He looked at her with a seriousness that sent a chill through her spine. There is a place they will not find. We must reach it before they gain ground. He motioned for her to follow. Stay close to me. Step where I step. Do not answer if they call for you, but they do not call your name, he said quietly. They call their claim. Her throat tightened. Tawi led her through a narrow ridge, then down a steep slope where moss softened each step. The forest swallowed them like a secret. After several minutes, he murmured, "We are almost there." Where? Somewhere only I know. He glanced back at her. Somewhere you will be safe. And for the first time since she fled her settlement, Ilara felt the faintest flicker of hope. The path Tawi led her on grew narrower and steeper, until Ilara had to use both hands to steady herself against rocks slick with moss. Though he moved quickly, he always kept just close enough that if she slipped, he could catch her. His silence was not cold, it was purposeful, protective. Like a blanket wrapped around both of them as the forest thickened. They climbed for what felt like an hour, the sound of the pursuers fading behind them until the voices were only ghosts lingering in memory. Finally, the trees parted, revealing a small valley tucked between two ridges hidden so well it seemed carved directly from the mountain's shadow. Ilara stopped. Breath caught in her throat. A small cabin stood at the valley's heart. Weathered wood, smoke-blackened stones, a roof patched with leaves and bark. It wasn't large, but it was sturdy, rooted in the land, like it belonged here more than any settlement she had ever seen. "This is yours?" she whispered. Tawi nodded. "A hunting shelter. My father built it when I was a boy." He walked ahead, pushing open the door with a creak. Warm, earthy scents drifted out, dried herbs, cedar smoke, leather. The kind of scent that made her shoulders loosen without her meaning to. He motioned gently. "Come inside." The cabin was simple. A single bed covered with a woven blanket, a table made from a tree stump, shelves filled with jars and bundles of dried plants. Everything had purpose. Nothing was wasted. "You can rest here," Tawi said, setting his bow against the wall. "No one knows of this place except me." Ilara swallowed hard. The safety she felt frightened her. Safety had never come without a price before: servitude, silence, sacrifice. Yet here, in this quiet valley, Tawi seemed to ask nothing of her. Her exhaustion hit her all at once, turning her limbs to water. She sank down onto the wooden stool near the table. Tawi watched her carefully, then knelt to inspect her feet. She startled. "You don't have to." "I do," he said simply. "You will not be able to walk tomorrow unless I tend to them." Gentle but sure, he untied her worn shoes. Her blisters were raw and swollen, the skin rubbed nearly through. The sight made heat rise to her cheeks. She hated feeling helpless, but Tawi neither scolded nor pitied her. He took a small clay jar from the shelf, opened it, and the scent of pine and crushed herbs filled the room. "This will cool the pain," he murmured, applying the salve with deliberate care. She bit her lip, trying not to wince. "Why are you helping me?" He paused. Not the question, she realized her tone. She asked, like someone who had been taught not to expect kindness. He met her eyes. "Because you need it. Because you are alone. Because someone should." The simplicity of his answer struck her harder than a blow. She looked away quickly, blinking fast. When he finished, He rose and stepped back, giving her space. "I will make food," he said, turning to the hearth. She watched him in silence as he lit the small fire, his movements clean and practiced. Soon, the cabin filled with the comforting scent of simmering broth. When he handed her a bowl, the heat seeped through her fingers and into her chest. "Eat," he said softly. "Strength will return." She ate in small spoonfuls, each one warming her from the inside out. Tawi ate little, keeping most of his attention on the woods outside the small window. After a quiet moment, she asked, "Will they find this place?" "No." He looked back at her, voice firm. "They look for you in anger. Anger makes men blind." She breathed out shakily. "And you? Why are you helping me? You don't know who I am." A slight smile ghosted across his mouth. "I know you ran," he said. "And you ran with courage." Her chest tightened. She had never been called courageous before. As night settled over the valley, the cabin warmed with firelight, casting soft shadows across the wooden walls. Alara curled beneath the blanket. Tawi offered, exhaustion pulling her deeper than fear. Before sleep claimed her, she whispered into the quiet, "Thank you." Tawi's voice came from the shadows, steady as ever. "Rest. You are safe here." And for the first time since she fled her old life, she believed those words. Days passed in the quiet valley, each one stretching Alara's nerves and her body in ways she hadn't realized she needed. She woke to birdsong and the scent of pine, and each day, she felt the forest breathe around her, a living presence that both calmed and humbled her. Tawi's steady presence was a constant anchor, though he remained distant in ways that made her wonder if she was truly welcome or merely tolerated. One afternoon, as the sun filtered through the branches into dappled patches on the cabin floor, Tawi spoke a question she had both dreaded and hoped would come. "How long do you plan to hide here?" Alara paused, spoon suspended above her bowl. I don't know. Until they stop looking?" Her voice faltered. She wasn't used to thinking about the future beyond flight. The idea of peace, of safety, of permanence, was foreign and almost frightening. Tawi sat across from her on the cabin floor, legs crossed. He regarded her carefully, his eyes steady, patient, unblinking. "You cannot hide forever," he said. "And you should not. You deserve more than hiding. You deserve a life where your choice is your own." Alara's throat tightened. She wanted to believe him, wanted to feel hope, but the fear clawed at her chest. "They will come for me. They'll drag me back. I cannot fight them." He nodded, acknowledging the truth of her words. "That is why I offer you a choice," he said slowly. "There is a way to ensure your safety, a way to make it impossible for them to claim you." She frowned, unsure where he was going. Tawi stood and moved toward the small hearth, picking up a folded piece of leather. He held it gently, as though it contained something fragile. "You may take my name," he said. "By doing so, you claim a place on this land, a home, and protection. No one may lay claim to you here, except yourself." Alara's hands shook as she absorbed his words. To take a name, his name meant stepping into a world she had never imagined, into a culture that wasn't hers, into a life she could not yet see. It was frightening. It was thrilling. Why me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He met her gaze steadily. "Because you are human, and human beings deserve safety and respect. Because you ran from a life you did not choose. Because you are brave." The word struck her harder than any act of kindness could. Brave. She had never been called brave before. Her parents had called her stubborn, disobedient, foolish. Her fiancé had called her flighty, inconvenient. But here, in the quiet mountain valley, a man she barely knew told her she was brave, and that bravery gave her power. She looked down at the rough wooden floor, heart hammering. To accept meant leaving behind everything she knew, everything familiar. But to decline meant continued flight, continued fear, continued vulnerability. Her eyes met his again. There was no pressure, no demand, only an offer. And that alone felt revolutionary. She realized then that for the first time, she could make a decision without coercion. Finally, she drew in a trembling breath. I will take it," she said. Her voice was soft, but each word carried weight. Tawi nodded once, simply. "Then you are safe," he said. "You belong here, and nowhere else may claim you." A warmth rose in her chest, unfamiliar and dizzying. She felt the tight coils of fear begin to loosen. For the first time since her flight, she could imagine waking without dread, moving through the forest without constantly watching for enemies. And yet, beneath the relief, another feeling stirred, something quieter, deeper, unspoken: gratitude, trust, perhaps even the fragile beginnings of something more. Something she dared not name. The valley around them seemed to pause in that moment, the sunlight catching the edges of the cabin, the pines whispering softly, as if acknowledging the new bond. Lara, once a girl running from a life she did not choose, now held a choice that belonged only to her. And for the first time, it felt like the first step toward freedom. Lara had begun to settle into the rhythm of the valley. Days were no longer consumed by fear, but by small tasks, helping Tawi gather herbs, learning which plants healed, which nourished, which could be used to cook a simple meal. She was stronger than she had been when she first arrived, though each step still reminded her of the desperation that had driven her here. But safety, she soon realized, was never permanent. One late afternoon, while the sun dipped behind the western ridge, a distant sound shattered the quiet, the unmistakable clatter of hooves, the shouting of men, the sharp crack of voices carrying through the forest. Her heart lurched violently. She had hoped, prayed even, that the pursuers had given up. "They've found the valley," she whispered, panic constricting her throat. Tawi's expression remained calm, but his eyes hardened like stone. "No," he said softly, "they've found the path. They do not know where we are yet, but we must prepare." Lara felt her knees weaken. "They'll take me back." They will not," Tawi interrupted firmly. "Not if I stand between you and them." Before she could protest, he had already moved toward the cabin's edge, scanning the forest with eyes honed by years of hunting. "Stay inside. Trust what I have built here," he commanded. The first men appeared at the tree line, their horses stumbling over roots and underbrush. The settlement had sent more than just her former fiancé. Her father's pride, anger, and the man she had been expected to marry were all embodied in their relentless pursuit. They carried ropes and whips, their shouts carrying the weight of entitlement, claiming her as theirs. Lara clutched the doorframe, her stomach churning. She had never seen Tawi move like this before. Every motion was precise, deliberate. He guided her to a hidden part of the valley she hadn't noticed, behind a cluster of thick pines and a rocky slope. "They will not reach you here," he whispered. "They do not know the land." The men pressed closer, their confidence growing with every shout. "Lara, come out now," her father barked. "This is for your own good. This is for your own good." Her fiancé echoed, brandishing a whip, but as they drew nearer, Tawi's presence became unmistakable. He stepped onto a rise, tall and steady, bow in hand, eyes cold and unwavering. The men froze for the briefest moment, then fury replaced hesitation. "You cannot touch her," Tawi said, voice carrying across the clearing. There was no challenge in it, no uncertainty, just the absolute certainty of authority. "Who are you to stop us?" one of the men shouted. "She belongs to us." "She belongs to no one," Tawi replied. "She is under my protection. Leave now, or face the consequences." From the tree line, more figures appeared, Tawi's tribe, silently joining him. They did not speak, did not shout. Their presence alone was enough. The settlers' confidence faltered. Outnumbered and unprepared for the land they did not know, the men's anger turned to hesitation. Lara watched in awe, her fear slowly giving way to awe. Tawi did not merely protect her, he commanded the forest itself, wielding every shadow, every path, every hidden corner of the valley as a weapon. Her father's voice cracked in frustration. "This is madness. She is my daughter. She is hers," Tawi said. "And she chooses to stay." The men, realizing they had no claim here, no power over her, and no knowledge of the land, slowly retreated. Their shouts faded, their hooves receding, until silence returned to the valley. Lara sank to her knees, shaking, a mixture of relief and disbelief coursing through her. Tawi approached, offering a hand to lift her. They will not return, he said quietly. Not here, not now. For the first time, she understood the depth of the choice he had given her. The sanctuary was not merely a cabin in the woods. It was a shield, a promise that her life could truly be hers. And for the first time since fleeing, she felt the stirrings of hope, tempered with the undeniable realization she was no longer running, she was finally standing. The valley no longer felt like a temporary refuge. Each day, as sunlight spilled through the pines and danced on the cabin walls, Ilara began to feel the stirrings of a life she had never dared to imagine. It was not simply safety that settled around her, it was the sense of belonging, subtle but undeniable. Weaving into the corners of her heart, Tawi had taught her the first lessons in survival here: which roots could be eaten, which herbs healed, how to move silently through the underbrush. She stumbled at first, unsure of the land, but he never mocked her mistakes. Instead, he corrected gently, patiently, giving her confidence with each step she took. Slowly, she began to feel capable. She was learning not just to survive, but to live. The tribe welcomed her cautiously at first, their eyes wary of the newcomer from another world. Yet they saw the courage in her, the way she had run from oppression and found her way into Tawi's care. Gradually, she began to participate in the rhythms of the valley, collecting firewood, preparing meals, tending small gardens, listening to the elders' stories by the fire. Each task, each lesson, slowly stitched her into the community. Ilara noticed subtle changes in herself. She walked taller, her voice grew steadier. The fear that had once lodged itself in her chest like a stone was no longer constant. It ebbed, replaced by determination. And all the while, Tawi moved through the days as quietly as ever, present but not intrusive, a constant anchor for her newfound stability. One evening, after a long day gathering herbs and tending the small garden, Ilara and Tawi sat outside the cabin, sharing a simple meal. The sky was a tapestry of oranges and purples, the air rich with the scent of pine and smoke. She watched the way he handled the fire, the way his hands moved naturally, confidently, like the forest itself obeyed him. "Do you ever tire of this life?" she asked, hesitant. Tawi glanced at her, a slow smile touching his lips. "I tire of nothing," he said. "The land provides, the work gives purpose, and the people I care for, they give meaning." His eyes met hers, steady and unwavering. Ilara felt a flicker in her chest. She could not name. As the weeks passed, she began accompanying Tawi on short hunting trips, learning the land as he had. He never treated her as fragile or incapable. Each day she returned stronger, more confident, realizing that the mountains and forests no longer seemed like barriers, they were part of her new home. Her thoughts of the settlement, of the life she had fled, became less urgent, less consuming. She still remembered the fear, the despair, but it no longer defined her. She had a place now, a life of her own choosing, rooted in respect, safety, and care. At night, when the fire was low and the stars spilled across the sky, Ilara often found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought her here. She had been a girl running from a life she did not choose, fleeing into uncertainty with only fear as her companion. And yet here she was, embraced by a community that valued her presence, guided by a man who had offered her freedom without demand, respect without condition. The feeling of belonging settled deeper each day. She could laugh again, quietly at first, then with abandon. She could speak without fear. She could look at Tawi and feel warmth, not danger. One evening, as the valley glowed with the fading light, Tawi placed a hand lightly on hers. "You have chosen to stay," he said simply, "and here, you are welcome, always." Ilara's chest tightened. A home truly, fully, was something she had never thought possible. And yet, for the first time in her life, she felt it. Not just the safety of the valley, not just the protection of a man who understood her, but the profound, quiet certainty that she belonged somewhere, with someone, and with herself. The mountains around her seemed to whisper in agreement. She was no longer running, she was home. Winter's first frost touched the valley, painting the trees with a delicate sparkle. Ilara stood at the edge of the clearing, wrapped in a thick blanket, watching her breath swirl in the cold morning air. The mountains, always vast and silent, seemed to cradle the valley even tighter now, a reminder of the sanctuary she had found. Months had passed since she had fled the life that once threatened to consume her, and the girl who had run with nothing but fear and determination was gone. In her place stood a woman who knew her strength, her worth, and her place in the world. Tawi approached quietly, his footsteps softened by the frost. She turned to see him, the rising sun catching the edges of his face, revealing the calm strength that had first drawn her trust, and slowly, unknowingly, her heart. He carried 2 mugs of steaming tea, setting one gently beside her. "You always know when I need this," she said, a small smile touching her lips. He shrugged slightly, a hint of humor in his expression. "The mountains teach patience," he said. In observation, they sipped in silence, the warmth of the tea spreading through their hands, through their bodies, grounding them in a moment that felt suspended outside time. Alara had learned the rhythms of the valley, the quiet strength of the land, and the unwavering patience of Tawi. But she had also learned something more subtle, more profound: the way safety and respect could nurture trust, and how trust could slowly bloom into love. Her gaze fell on Tawi's hands, calloused from work, gentle when tending the valley, steady when guiding her through danger. She remembered the moment he had offered her the choice to stay, the offer of his name and his land, a gesture of protection without possession. That choice had been hers alone, and it had been the first time in her life she truly felt free. As she began, unsure how to voice the tumult of feelings that had grown inside her, Tawi met her gaze, patient and unpressured. "You don't have to say anything," he said softly. Words are unnecessary, and yet, she did speak, because silence could not contain what had grown quietly over the months. "I never thought I could belong anywhere," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "And now, I can't imagine not being here, with you, with this place." Tawi's eyes softened, a rare smile breaking through his usual calm. "You belong," he said simply, "here, with the valley, with me, with yourself." The words wrapped around her like a warm cloak. In that moment, Alara realized that what she had thought was love from Tawi, if it was even love, was something deeper. It was safety made tangible. It was respect, trust, and choice, all combined to create a bond neither fear nor obligation could touch. And within that bond, love had grown naturally, quietly, without pressure, without expectation. Ilara reached for his hand, her fingers threading through his. It was neither sudden nor dramatic, it simply felt right. Steady, certain. The warmth of his palm matched the warmth of the valley around them. "You've taught me how to be brave," she whispered, "how to stand without fear, and how to love, not because I am forced, but because I choose to." Tawi squeezed her hand gently. "And you have taught me that love is not possession. It is partnership, respect, freedom, choosing each other, every day, not because we must, but because we want to." The frost sparkled around them, the mountains silent witnesses. Alara leaned her head against his shoulder, and for the first time, she felt completely at peace. She had fled from fear, from coercion, from a life that was not hers. But here, with Tawi, she had found something far greater than mere safety: a home, community, and a love that had grown naturally from the soil of trust and freedom. The valley exhaled in the still morning air, as if in agreement. And Alara, once a runaway, now stood firmly in a life of her own choosing, her heart full, her spirit free, and her future hers alone.